Hey there, and welcome to Abyssal Painting. Today I am painting Crossbreed Pricilla from Dark Souls. This model was designed by Bulkamancer Sculpts. I'm not affiliated with them, but I'll put a link to their Patreon down below if you're interested in their work or this particular model. So for today's paint job, I decided I wanted to go for speed, and I was actually able to paint her in 99 minutes from start to finish. The reason I wanted to go fast was because my motivation really hasn't been there the last few weeks. I think the holidays just kind of drains me, and I've just not had the energy after I get home from work at the end of the day. But I really enjoy painting. It's my hobby, it's my pastime, it's a great stress reliever. So when I'm away from it for too long, I start feeling that as well. So if you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. You want to paint, but then when it comes time to actually go and paint, the motivation's just not there. So for me, the way to break through this is to just paint something, anything. And I don't have to be fancy about it. I don't have to be like, oh, I really love this model. I just go to my pile of shame. If you have a resin printer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You'll be subscribed to all these different Patreons that create all kinds of dope models, and you'll print them like crazy thinking these are gonna be so fun to paint. And then you will print them and they will sit on the shelf and just collect dust. Well, when I hit these motivational slumps, as it were, when I want to pull myself out of it, I will go to that pile of shame and I will just pick something. And today it is Crossbreed Pricilla, who I printed honestly about a year ago. So, I mean, she's been sitting around for a minute just waiting to be painted. So starting off with the base, I just grabbed a trio of grays, a dark, a neutral, and a bright, and I just built them up with a dry brush. Once I was done with that, I took this transparent blue, it's a cultist cloak, and I just lightly sprayed it into some of the deeper edges and recesses, and up on the top, I created a bit of a shadow area where she will be standing. With the base out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to her skin. There's not a lot of skin on this model. She's mainly fur, but she does have a face. She has two little hands and she has two little feet, so we need to make sure that they are taken care of. Again, I'm not taking a lot of time with this, so I take some thinned down magenta and I spray over everything. I'll focus a little more on the top down just so it builds up, but I still want a little bit of the black kind of peeking through on the undersides because that will create a bit of a shadow and it will give me a guide here in a couple of seconds when I come back with some red ink to spray from the bottom up into those shadowed areas. Whether or not you elect to do this magenta and red underpainting for your skin tones is entirely up to you. Personally, I like the way it makes my skin tones look. I paint fairly thin when I'm going through the airbrush, so it builds up and creates a more lifelike effect. However, you don't have to. There's plenty of models that I've painted where I didn't do any underpainting and I just built up a triad of different skin tones from darkest to lightest, and I think they look pretty good too. So it's really up to you. And I guess if I was going for even more speed, I could have skipped this step altogether and just went straight into the skin tones. But oh well. So speaking of skin tones, my base color is going to be this Tan Flesh by Acryl. Thin your paints way down. One, it makes it a lot easier to go through your airbrush, preventing clogs. But two, because you are spraying thin, it allows you to build up color while also being able to keep that underpainting that you just did. And once I get done with all of this, I'm going to move to my midtone, which is going to be Peachy Flesh, again by Acryl. I'm not going to be as heavy-handed with this one. I'm going to be a little more sparing when I put it on, and you will get something that looks like that. She is very fair complected, so very light skin. So once I get done applying this mid-tone, I'm going to go for my highlight, which is Olive Flesh by, again, Acryl. As this is my highlight, I'm going to be far more selective with where I'm placing it, generally with all the higher areas where light would be hitting that I really want to draw some attention to. And when you're done, you get something that looks like this. Again, you see that red underpainting still kind of showing through, which gives it a bit of life and depth. And that's it. Skin tones are done. So I'm taking this satin varnish and applying it to her face and head in order to prep her for liquid mask. So I'm using Vallejo's liquid mask and I'm taking this little silicone sculptor's tool to apply it. I really like this stuff and I don't think I use it as much as I probably should, but you simply just take it out of the jar, put it where you want it, and it does a really good job of just sitting in place. It doesn't run too much unless you get really heavy-handed with it. So just kind of build it up in layers and it sets really quickly. So if you keep overworking the same area, you'll start to peel it off. But once you're done, you'll have a big green glob of whatever, wherever, and you set it off to the side to finish drying, and I'm going to move on to painting the fur. For my base, I'm using this Thunderstorm Blue by Army Painter. This is their Army Painter Air line, which is supposed to be formulated for airbrushes, meaning that it is pre-thinned. I find that I still need to thin it even further in order for it to effectively go through my airbrush smoothly. Even at higher pressures, I need to thin the pre-thinned paint even further. I don't know if that's unique to me or if this is a common theme for people that use this paint, but it is what it is. I like the color, so I'm using it here. And once I'm done with that base color, I'm going to move over and use this gray blue by Monument Hobbies Pro Acryl, and I am going to dry brush all of the fur. This is a highly textured model, so dry brushing is the absolute way to go. Also, when you're painting for speed, dry brushing is fast. It's effective and it looks good on the shelf. No one's going to know that you spent 5 minutes doing this. They're going to look at it and be like, wow, that must have taken a lot of time. And you'll nod your head and say, sure did, and move on about your day. So once we are done with all of that, we will have a piece that looks a little bit like this, and I'm going to put all those parts together, and we're going to use some fairy dust by Army Painter and that gray blue. Heavy with the fairy dust, just a couple of drops of the gray blue just to tint it with a blue color, thin it way down, and then you're going to spray over everything. So the dark blue and the dry brushing that we just did were all underpainting for this final step. And you end up with a result that looks a little something like this, which is this icy, ethereal kind of look, which I think suits her really, really well. Now, moving on to painting her hair, I'm going to start off with this ivory. Feel free to use any darker off-white color that you have, and I'm going to spray all over. Again, I'm being fairly thin with my paint. This paint's pretty old. I've had it for a while. And it kind of starts speckling, which actually works to sell the effect. I wouldn't recommend just having your stuff speckle like crazy. This was not a controlled speckling. It was just a happy accident, and I pretty much tapped out the ivory and the bright ivory that I used for a highlight. Now, going back to that pixie dust and light blue that I had left over from her torso, I'm going to lightly dry brush all over her hair. I'm not going for any rhyme or reason here. I'm just trying to create a little bit of nuance that will tie her hair into her fur and kind of create a bit of a balance here. So it's not very heavy-handed, but just enough that it creates the effect. Now it's time to work on her portrait, but before we can do that, we need to remove the liquid mask. I'm using a metal tool here. If you do that, be very careful because you can break through your varnish and end up tearing up your paint job underneath. If you don't have the metal tool, use your fingernail, use a dulled down toothpick, whatever, just try to get a lip and then peel everything off. Because I put it on so thick earlier, it peeled off really, really easily in one big piece. And you're left with this, nice clean lines, and on to the eyes. To start out, I'm going to use black to block everything in, as well as kind of create what will become her eyeliner. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to take this bone color. You can use, again, any off-white that you have to paint in the whites of her eyes. Now, I want to try and be careful to keep some black above and below, again, for the eyeliner effect. Once you get done putting all of the white in, you're going to take a step back, look at it, eyeball it, and make sure everything looks even. In my case, it didn't look even. The left eye actually needed some attention because I made it too thin in comparison to the other eye, and I liked the thicker look. So just go back in, take your black paint, again, a very fine pointed brush, and gently go in and rebuild out that black eyeliner. Once you're happy with how her eyes look, I'm going to take some black green and start building out her iris. And there it is. Quick, easy, done. Just kidding. You want to kind of figure out where your center point is and then build your iris out. I find it to be a lot easier to start small and make bigger than it is to try to make it big and then try to keep them even, because you will end up with some wonky eyeballs and that's no fun. From there, I'm going to take some yellow green and I'm going to build in, keeping a bit of an outer rim of that dark green, and then the center is going to be that nice bright green color. Her pupils are actually slits because she's half dragon, so go through, make a couple of slits in there, and you have some dragon eyeballs, which I like. They look nice. Now let's go ahead and paint her lips. I'm using this Purple Alchemy, which is a speed paint by Army Painter. I thin it down and just slowly build it up on her lips to get a nice soft pink effect. After I'm done with that, I'm going to go back to that pixie dust paint and I'm going to go through and paint all over her forehead, her cheeks, her eyebrows, which are these silvery scales that she has. And just take your time, make little gentle brush strokes and just kind of build them out. And when all is said and done, you'll have a really cool looking effect, especially when the light catches it and reflects off of the silver particles that are in there. And honestly, kind of looking at it, if you don't have this pixie dust color, I think if you have like a really bright silver metallic, if you're very careful, you can kind of go around and pick out some pieces there and get a very similar effect. Additionally, for the eagle-eyed amongst you, I painted the horns coming out of her head with that same bone color that I used for the whites of her eyes. Now, her portrait looks good, but we can make it look better, and it's still not going to take any time at all. So I have this cheap makeup palette that I bought online, and I like to use this to create makeup effects and to kind of add depth to portraits that I do. This is quick, it's easy, and when I try to use an airbrush to do this, while I have done it in the past, I find it to be far less controlled than if I just use this makeup palette, build it up on my paintbrush, and just kind of dab it on where I want it. The cool thing about it is, if you don't like it, you can just brush it off with your finger. Again, make sure you have varnished your model before you do this, because if you start rubbing all over it, you're going to peel your paint off. But in her reference photos, she has this really dark red under eye, so I went ahead and built that up, and I was really happy with the effect. From there, I take a lighter pink and kind of put some blush on her cheeks, and once I'm done with that, I take this darker burgundy color and apply that to her lips, again creating some more depth. And you step back, you take a look at her, she's looking pretty good. But one final step, I'm going to take this black makeup powder and I'm going to apply it to her upper eyelids. This is going to create more depth, more contrast. It's going to draw your eye to the model's face. And when you're speed painting something and not putting a lot of effort into all the minor details, the one area that you want people to really focus on at the end of the day is going to be the model's portrait, their face. So spend a little bit of time here, make sure it looks good, and then lock it in with varnish. After that, take this white blue or a very, very light blue that you might have and paint all of her finger and toenails. Done with all that, it is now time to paint the scythe. So I'm starting with this Vallejo metal color, steel, and I am simply going to dry brush it on all of the metal part of the scythe. Once I am done with that, I'm going to take a bright aluminum color and I am going to focus on the sharpened edge of the blade, just kind of making upward brush strokes, and you get this really cool looking effect which looks like it was sharpened in that area, and keeping the darker metal up top. Done with that, it's time to paint the wood, and I'm going to start with a black brown to create my base coat. Just take your time, paint all the little tendrily bits that are kind of going up into there and work them down. And I mean, there's not much to be said about it. You're painting in dark brown. I would encourage you to be fairly careful when you are painting down around the hands. I'm using a bigger brush right now to knock out the bulk of it, but once I get done with that, I will transition over to a smaller brush to get in between her fingers, doing my best not to get it onto her hands. Pro tip, put some varnish on there so in case you do mess up and get it on her skin, you can easily wipe it away quickly with some water on your brush and not worry about ruining your paint job. Done with our base coat, we are now going to take this drab brown, or you can take any white brown color that you have in your repertoire of paints, and we are back to dry brushing, this time to pick out all of the wood grain texture that is built into this model. Take your time around the hands. Again, we don't want to paint the hands any other color than what we've already done with our skin tones. And when all is said and done, you'll have a very nice looking handle for your scythe. Once you're happy with the result, slap it on the model, pat yourself on the shoulder because you just got this thing done in less than 2 hours. And there you have it. Crossbreed Pricilla is done. Another model taken out of my pile of shame and added to my completed works. Thank you for coming along and hanging out with me. Hopefully you learned something from this video, or if nothing else, it was just a fun watch. Leave me some comments down below on what you do to deal with painting fatigue or hobby fatigue. How do you get your motivation up? How do you find the momentum to get yourself to sit down and actually paint something? Even if it seems small, it might be helpful to somebody else. So I'll be interested to see what you guys have to say. And until next time, later.